Welcome to Walking Through the Word for today. We're in John chapter 18, and this begins the Passion narrative in John. And from 18 all the way through 20, we're going to see what we call the Passion of the Christ, which is, in this case, his arrest, his trial, his crucifixion, his burial, and his resurrection. And it all starts right here with Jesus being arrested. Now, John has been really good about symbolism. That's one of the beautiful perspectives that John brings to the four Gospels. And John brings another parallel that we can't really ignore. If you look at it here in verse 1, when he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples, crossed the Kidron Valley, and on the other side, there was a garden. Now, when you hear the word garden and you talk about the Bible, what's the first thing that you think of? Probably the Garden of Eden. This is not by accident that John is bringing this parallel. You can go all the way back to John chapter 1 and you recognize that John is bringing parallels all the way to Genesis. Genesis 1, in the beginning was the Word, in the beginning God created. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning was the Word. There's no accident that John is bringing these parallels. And even here at the crucifixion, John is bringing a stark a contrast. Remember where the garden and the betrayal and the deception brought about sin. This betrayal and this deception is going to bring about redemption. Now, Judas, who betrayed him, John uses this all the time when he brings up Judas. He always talks about him as the traitor, the one who betrayed him, those kind of things. Because again, John is trying to bring a parallel to the ultimate deceiver and traitor, that is Satan, who once again is here trying to usurp, trying to get rid of God's plan. See, Satan has known God's plan from the beginning when he said that there will be an offspring that will strike your head with his heel. This is what's happening, and Satan is desperate to stop this and prevent this. The deceiver is here, and the deceiver is here in full force. And so John is trying to make this parallel to help us recognize that what Judas is doing is the bidding of Satan. That Judas is serving on behalf of Satan against the eternal forces of darkness. Now, Judas comes to betray Jesus, and he brings with him a detachment of soldiers in verse 3, some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. In other words, they were prepared for an army. But I like what David Garland says, they are hopelessly outnumbered by one. Jesus, in verse 4, knowing all that was going to happen, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" And they replied, "Jesus of Nazareth." And then Jesus says a very simple phrase. He says, "I am he." And a very curious thing happens, because it says in verse 6 that when Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Now, we don't really know why. The narrative doesn't explain why that happened, but it is a very natural thing for us to look at and go, well, of course they did. They didn't realize who they were facing. They didn't realize they were facing the Messiah. The truth is, Judas didn't recognize that he was facing the Messiah. You see, Judas, as we talked about before, had, we believe, an idea of what the Messiah was supposed to be, and Jesus was not fitting it. And I think this was Judas's, in his mind, his effort to get Jesus to come and be that Messiah. But Jesus had a mission. And so they fell back, they drew back, and they fell to the ground. This was a natural reaction in reverence. And we do the same thing, even as sinners, when we recognize the hand of God. There's a moment when all of us recognize the hand of God. And yet in that moment, we have a decision. Are we going to acknowledge who God is, or are we going to look at it and go, shrug it off, it's not important? Well, these men shrugged it off. And so again, they asked, or he asked, "Who is it you want?" And they said, "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he." Now, this is the second time that Jesus has said, "I am he." We see it three times because the third time the narrator says it, but Jesus is basically using his "I am" statements. I am. And you can't help but hearken back to the different ones that he said. Those "I am" statements. I am the true vine. I am the shepherd. I am the door. I am the way, the truth, and the life. All of these "I am" statements that Jesus brought have been culminated into this moment. I told you that I am he. And if you're looking for me, then let these men go. And John, as he has done really 30 other times, has a narrative little moment right here where he says, "This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me." This is the prayer that he gave in chapter 17 when he was praying about his disciples. But there was that one exception, wasn't there? There was Judas, the traitor, the betrayer, as John says here. And this is happening so that the disciples will be protected, so that Jesus will bear the brunt of not just all of creation's sins, but he will actually be the Savior of their physical lives on this evening. Okay, that's it for today. We'll continue in this conversation next time.